After two failed summits with the United States, North Korea is set to welcome a new guest. Chinese President Xi Jinping is all set to reach the hermit nation. Ahead of the high-stakes visit, the Chinese president has written an opinion piece for North Korea's ruling party newspaper. He wrote that Beijing was willing to work with Pyongyang to prepare a grand plan for achieving, quote-unquote, permanent stability in East Asia. The connotations to the US was obvious. After all, Xi Jinping will be subsequently meeting his American counterpart Donald Trump in Japan for the G20 summit. White House Communications Director Hope Hicks testified before the House Judiciary Committee in a closed-door hearing. The interview marks the first time someone from Trump's close circle has spoken since the release of the Mueller report. Hicks drew fire from the Democrats for not answering questions about if Trump broke the law. Hicks left the White House in March 2018. The Dutch National Police has named 3 Russians and 1 Ukrainian as suspects in the MH17 downing. All 298 passengers and crew members on board the flight from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur were killed in July 2014 after a missile had shattered the Boeing 777 mid-air. The investigation team, which had detectives from the Netherlands, Malaysia, Australia, Belgium and Ukraine, said that the BUK missile system used to shoot down the flight MH17 came from the Russian Army's 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade. Russia has always denied responsibility for shooting down the flight. United States President Donald Trump has got a major boost for his second run to the White House. Trump raised over $1 million per hour on the day he launched his re-election campaign yesterday. In fact, Trump raised a record-breaking $25 million on day one. The announcement was made by Trump's campaign manager, Tim Murtaugh. The U.S. president kicked off his campaign with much pomp and show in Orlando in Florida State. The amount is also reflective of Trump's increasing popularity. The U.S. president's campaign had raised almost $30 million in 3 months earlier this year. A UN expert's report reveals that there is credible evidence of Saudi Arabia's crown prince and other senior officials being liable for journalist Jamal Khashoggi's killing. In a 100-page analysis, the UN Special Rapporteur Agnes Calmard said that the death of the journalist was an international crime. The report suggests that the crown prince of Saudi Arabia should be investigated. The report throws light on Khashoggi's last moments by using recordings of conversation from inside the Istanbul consulate where he was killed. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi was murdered. In a televised speech, Erdogan said that Morsi, who collapsed in a courtroom, did not die of natural causes. Erdogan accused Egyptian authorities of failing to intervene and provide medical assistance as Morsi suffered a heart attack. The 67-year-old was on trial for spying. The Turkish president also said that he will follow up on cause of Morsi's death. He added that he will do whatever is needed for Egypt to be tried in international courts. The United Nations Human Rights Chief arrived in Venezuela on Wednesday for a visit that comes amid heightened international pressure on President Nicolas Maduro for allegedly silencing opponents with jail torture and excessive violence. On her first visit to South American country, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet is expected to meet with Maduro and opposition leader Juan Guaido. But the fact that her 3-day trip is even taking place is seen as something of a minor triumph for rights activists. A Union Pacific freight train derailed in Nevada on Wednesday, spilling vegetable oil and prompting the closure of an interstate highway. Oil spilled out of one of the 22 derailed cars after the train went off the tracks. No injuries have been reported in the derailment, and the cause of it was under investigation. U.S. President Donald Trump has awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom to economist Arthur Laffer, whose theories on tax cuts have guided Republican policy since the 1980s. Trump presented the award to Laffer on Wednesday. Laffer had advised Trump during his presidential campaign and co-wrote a flattering book titled Trumponomics. New Zealand's government on Thursday launched a multi-billion-dollar 6-month buyback scheme to compensate owners of newly banned semi-automatic weapons prohibited in the wake of deadly attacks on 2 mosques in the southern city of Christchurch. Finance Minister Grant Robertson and Minister of Police Stuart Nash said in a joint email statement that $208 million had been set aside to compensate owners of the banned semi-automatic firearms up to 95% of the original cost. They would have until 20th of December to hand in their weapons. Regime attacks killed 17 civilians and 11 combatants in Syria's jihadist-run northwest on Wednesday. It is the latest violence to rattle the region, housing 3 million people. The bombardment destroyed shops and ripped bodies apart. Human remains were found more than 100 meters away from the site of the strike. The latest violence comes after UN Chief Antonio Guterres called on Tuesday on Russia and Turkey to stabilize the situation in the Idlib region. Two policemen were killed on late Tuesday when gunmen attacked a police station on the northern edge of the Niger capital, Niamey. The attack on the highway was the closest to the city by suspected jihadists who are waging a long-running insurgency in the country. Investigations are ongoing on the killings. However, no group immediately claimed the attack, which came weeks before the capital hosts an African Union summit on July 7th to 8th. The head of Sudan's ruling military council said on Wednesday it was ready to meet an opposition alliance to negotiate the country's transition towards democracy. Talks between the military council and the DFCF alliance had stalled before collapsing altogether when security forces stormed the protest camp outside the defense ministry on June 3rd, killing dozens. Sully's Sullenberger, the airline pilot who safely landed a U.S. Airways flight on the Hudson River in New York a decade ago, told a congressional panel on Wednesday that pilots of the now grounded Boeing 737 MAX should get new simulator training before the plane returns to service. Sullenberger, who has blasted Boeing and the Federal Aviation Administration for the roles in the 2 737 MAX crashes since October that killed 346 people, also said the U.S. system of certifying new aircraft is not working. His testimony came during a hearing meant to give lawmakers looking into Boeing and the 737 MAX crashes a better understanding of views on the steps needed to prevent similar crashes. Protesters took to the streets of London on Wednesday to draw attention to air pollution levels in the British capital. On the eve of Clean Air Day, the Extinction Rebellion group stopped traffic in Camden, a tourist hotspot in the central part of the city. The group, known for staging direct action protests against climate change, had set up camps at major points in the UK capital, including Oxford Circus, Waterloo Bridge and Westminster. This is what democracy looks like. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is all set to face trial for corruption and influence peddling. France's highest court has rejected Sarkozy's final bid to have the case thrown out. Sarkozy is accused of hearing to help a judge get promotion in return for leaked information about a separate inquiry. The case surfaced after investigators used phone taps to examine the allegation that late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi funded Sarkozy's campaign for presidency in 2007. Authorities in Berlin claim that they have recovered 670 kilograms of heroin at the German-Polish border. The drugs worth tens of millions of euros were found on a truck, packaged in small boxes disguised as Turkish sweets. A German news agency reported that it is the largest amount of heroin ever discovered in Germany in one go. The drugs were hidden in a truck coming from Kyrgyzstan. South Korea plans to send 50,000 tons of rice to North Korea. This is a part of the World Food Programme and is the second aid package announced over the past month. This move seeks to aid North Korea during food shortages and improve bilateral relations. The South Korean government will work with the UN agency to ensure that the food reaches the North Korean people without delay. Last week, South Korea sent $8 million to the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF. It was allocated for programs to provide medical aid to North Korean children and pregnant women. U.S. lawmakers held the first congressional hearing in more than a decade on slave reparations. They highlighted the debate over whether the U.S. should consider compensation for the descendants of slaves in the U.S. The hearing came amid a growing discussion in the Democratic Party about reparations. Several of the party's presidential candidates have endorsed looking at this idea. While the concept of reparation is moving towards the mainstream of the Democratic Party, the idea remains far from being accepted both among Democrats and public at large. The United Nations has said that despite populist rhetoric in the West, the real refugee crisis is playing out in developing countries, which hosts most of the record 70.8 million displaced people who have fled war and persecution. On the occasion of World Refugee Day on June 20th, the UN reflects that half of the world's forcibly displaced are children, and the 2018 total is the highest in nearly 70 years. The figure is conservative, as it does not include most of the 4 million Venezuelans who have fled abroad since 2015. In a big blow to brand Adidas, the European Union's second highest court has called it three-striped branding invalid. The court has ruled that the three-striped branding lacked a distinctive character. This is a setback for brand Adidas as rivals seek to muscle into the market for striped shoes and clothing. The court said the mark was not a pattern but an ordinary figurative mark. The court also found it relevant to involve colours. Adidas has the option to appeal to the European Court of Justice. A revolver believed to have been used by Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh to kill himself has been sold at an auction. The 7mm pocket revolver has been bought for 130,000 euros in Paris. The weapon was recovered in 1960s in the fields in a northern French village where Van Gogh is believed to have shot himself in the chest in 1890. However, Van Gogh's suicide was questioned in a book by Pulitzer Prize-winning authors. The book concluded that Van Gogh was shot by two teenagers. A fist fight between adults over a teenage umpire's calls during a youth baseball game involving 7-year-olds is under investigation. The video shot by spectators shows men exchanging punches on the field. Police has revealed that the umpire, whose calls apparently angered some coaches and parents, is 30.
What is happening?